There you go.
All right. This represents the upteenth gathering of the original panel from D'Angelo's first celebration of the anniversary of Sign of the Times in 2017. We have with us Miles Marshall Lewis, Zahir Ali, Elliot Powell, and Emil Dash. My name is Arthur Turnbull. I am your player coach for the morning slash afternoon, depending on your or evening, depending on your time zone. And I wanted to start this off in a very traditional way by going around the boxes and ask, what is your most favorite and least favorite song? I love you, Duff. From around the world in a day. Who was first? Elliot. Did
Uh,
I see your
oh,
hand?
no, I mean, I don't think you saw my hand, but okay. Oh, okay. As really, okay. Um, a little sweaty here because around when it comes to the 1980s catalog of Prince's, Around the World in a Day for me is actually at the bottom. So this is I know. So it's a whole thing for me to kind of talk about. I can talk about my favorite, which is Tambourine.
Hmm.
My favorite is Tambourine. I enjoy it because, folks who've seen us talk before, right? For me, it's like, all right, is there funk and is it nasty? And if it hits those two, it's a two-prong test, then most likely that's going to be getting me there to my favorite. And so Tambourine achieves both of those. I enjoy really how Prince is, and this is pun not intended, but like playing with the tambourine, playing with different kind of concepts about what a kind of tambourine might mean from a different kind of gender perspective. There's a lot that's actually happening there. Right, you get a kind of reference to a magazine, which makes me think about Darling Nikki, which is also another song that's dealing about
Mhm.
masturbation. So it's like
Mhm.
there are these interesting kind of callbacks that are happening in Tambourine. I think obviously the music is really great. I wish it were a little bit longer. And that's a whole other, that's actually, I don't want to get into that, but I think that's part of what also sometimes frustrates me about this album. There's some interesting kind of things that I think Prince is doing, where I think some of the songs are a bit too long that should be shorter, and some of the short songs should be a little bit longer. So Tambourine is my favorite. My my least favorite, I will think about this for a little bit because I have to think about it's a toss-up between two.
Okay.
And the one that I want to say is the one that I know is probably gonna get me banished. Um, but it's Condition of the Heart, which
Oh, damn.
again, I know it's gonna get me banished. I
You
know.
gonna need security on this virtual panel.
It is, and it
Interesting. Interesting.
so okay.
Well, seriously though, is it
Incredible
too much?
songwriting. It's
Is
too
it too
much.
much?
It's
Yeah,
too
all right.
much. It's too much. It's too slow. It's just
Don't
Mm.
help him out,
incredible.
Arthur. Don't help him out.
Incredible. Like Lynn, I love the songwriting. Songwriting is great. I'm not going to
Okay.
act like it's not. I am just
Uh-huh.
going to say it doesn't move me. So Condition of the Heart does not move
Mm,
me. It is a
mm.
song that when we get there, I'm very much like, I want this ride to be over. Can we get
Whoa.
to Raspberry Beret? That's kind of how I feel when I listen to it. Is okay, this is fine. This is very nice songwriting. It's instrumentally beautiful. It does nothing for me. It actually gives me a different condition in my heart.
There we are. There we
So,
are. There we
so
are.
that
There
is
we
that
are.
is that is where I go with that.
Just to let you
Yeah,
know, we're
yeah.
this early, we're what, 2 minutes into this? It's all caps in the chat at this point.
All caps.
All right. I'm just gonna pick Miles. How about you?
Sure. It's very difficult, I think I enjoy this album on a whole. It's hard to pick apart. You know how Love Sexy is supposed to be one song, like I once I put this on, I'm just along for the whole ride. I don't
Mm.
I
Hmm.
mean, you know, my favorite song, it's weird. I don't know, you know, okay, Paisley Park. Paisley Park is my
Uh,
favorite song on this record.
Okay.
I think that's a weird pick, probably. You know, I can't, it's hard to divorce these songs from their 12-inch versions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
actually, my
Mm-hmm.
favorite 12-inch of all time is America, because of its length and because of just the musical complexity going on and how much it proves that the Revolution is like a virtuosic, you know, sort of band or whatever. I was listening at what, 15, 14? I was 14 years old. I was listening at 14 to a lot of Electric Miles, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so my dad's records, you know, like Get Up With It and Jack Johnston, and like it was like a it was a thing with Miles where like
Mm-hmm.
one song would be the entire length of a side of the record, and that length would be about 25 minutes long, which was pretty much the length of America, you know. Like it's hard for me to pick America as my favorite song on this album. It isn't. But if there was a 20, like the 12-inch version, if that was on this album, that would be my favorite just because
Mm-hmm.
um you know, the Revolution as a band, Prince as a band leader, like it made me feel like, wow, you know, Prince is just doing something that Michael Jackson could never do. Not to constantly compare him to Michael Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, those were the black pop icons at that time. And I felt like, wow, this proves that like he absolutely should collaborate with Miles Davis, you know, which
Mm-hmm.
he would go on to do. Um, Paisley Park. So why pick Paisley Park, right? Um, it's hard to say. You know, it's hard to say. Uh, there's just nothing else on the record that 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 screams like I'm looking at the record right now. It's off camera. That screams out to me. I mean, you know, I was going through a thing personally where I was like learning Prince songs on the piano, and maybe it's just a personal thing because it's one of the first songs that I figured out all the way through. You know, I like the utopianism of it. You know, my dad, who I reference often in these spaces, was a Rolling Stone subscriber, and so
Mm-hmm.
you know, when Prince and when the album was reviewed by Rolling Stone, and it was the first of many places to compare it to Sergeant Pepper, you know, it made me sort of, you know, like ask like, well, so what's up? What is Sergeant Pepper? Like, what is up with that? You know, and I'd heard many of those Sergeant Pepper songs, and so I sort of understood, you know, that it had a colorful album cover and that it was psychedelic, quote unquote, you know. Um, but just I guess the utopianism, maybe, you know, and the musicality of it. You know, it's a weird pick, but I guess I need to stand by it. But and then my least favorite song, the same kind of deal. I can't. It's hard for me to pick a least favorite song. I don't really have one. What I will say, you know, since I kind of have to play by the rules and pick one, is that the end. I kind of wish the end of Temptation wasn't there. Maybe, you know, like I love Temptation
Mm-hmm.
as a rock song, as a rock dirge, like you know. I was fucking with that, you know, big time. But then it got like so weird at the end. You know, like I would always want to go and turn it off. Or, you know, if it was a CD, I wish it was like track 10, you know, so that I could like it would clip and I wouldn't have to hear all the weirdness between him and God, you know. But that doesn't make Temptation my least favorite song. I love that song. I just, you
Mm-hmm.
know, when it takes that turn, I'm like, all right, this is like that section from the live show video where you know he's having that dialogue with God during the
Mm-hmm.
Purple Rain tour or whatever. Um, so yeah, I guess those are my answers.
All right. Uh, Duff.
All right, this is going to be a long answer, but I'm not going to make it long. So it was different when I first heard this as a 14-year-old versus the 54-year-old that's before you today. So when I first heard this album as a 15-year-old, Tambourine was my favorite song, and it's still one of my favorite songs just because it's a song that only Prince could do.
Mm-hmm.
No one could ever come up with Tambourine.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just the drums, like knowing that Prince is drumming, and I just like it was incredible, like hearing that and the way that he sings it. I can't do it the ing part, you know, what all the ings that he does with tambourine.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was brilliant. In real time, I was into the album, you know, but we get to the end, to the ladder in Temptation, and I just wanted to die.
Mm.
Because I'm 14 years old, and I go like, these are the slowest songs on earth. Like, what is he doing? But that was a 14-year-old. I love these songs now as a 50-year-old, 54-year-old person. And I don't remember when you know what? I actually started getting with the ladder when that footage from the Love Sexy tour, that part, Steve Purcell, I think that footage is so incredible when he's at the piano playing the ladder. And I was like, okay, now I can get with the ladder. Whenever that came out, that's when I started getting with the ladder. And then obviously, I was listening to more blues, like beyond this, and really got into Temptation. The song that I always loved was "Condition of the Heart." It's actually a song that I don't listen to the same way that I don't listen to Another Lonely Christmas, because it had such an emotional effect on me that it can really change. If I'm in a happy mood, just listen to Condition of the Heart and I will no longer be happy. And
Mm.
that's, that there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just, for me, conveys the emotion that he put in that song, and it's like it channels into me. Like it's really I love "Condition of the Heart." I think it's a beautiful song, but of all of Prince's songs, those two songs I just mentioned are the songs that I have listened to the least in my life, because I also
Mm.
don't want to get too used to them, for because they're so special to me. So "Condition of the Heart" I think is really, really special. As far as the song that I don't like, and I've never liked it, except for the 12-inch version, Miles Marshall Lewis, because the 12 inches was where everything was Raspberry
Mhm.
Beret.
Ah,
It was too pop. It was too pop for me on the
really?
record. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously on the 12-inch with the fingers, like snapping and all
Right,
that,
right.
amazing. And I was with you, Miles, in terms of the America 20 plus version. That I was like in heaven when that 12-inch came out.
That was amazing.
I thought, like I was like, oh my God, this is just incredible. Combine that with the America video,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was over. I was like, like it was just like Prince is the best thing ever because of America, the 12-inch and the video. So there you go.
All right. All right. Zahir Ali.
I'll start with I'll say least played song is
Mhm.
Temptation because of the ending. It wasn't for me a good album closer. For me, The Latter was a better album closer. Um, so Temptation. And I didn't really listen to it a lot. Like that was the part where I like lifted the needle off the record. And you could do that
Mm-hmm.
because it's the last track. I was like, okay,
Right.
record is done as
Right.
far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I've listened to it now and I've come to appreciate it. But again, I think as some of you have said, that like whole conversation with God, I'm like, I could have done without that. Um, I mean, my favorite song from this project is "She's Always in My Hair." Right?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that to me,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can get into that, but like that is for me the song. That
Mm-hmm.
aside, I would say it's hard to pick a song. I mean, I think I was still hung up on the kind of conventional Minneapolis sound at this point. So I wanted more, which I got of Lindrum, especially. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted that flanger effect, which we
Mm-hmm.
got and some of the stuff. So like there were some of the things that Prince had been doing for now probably 3 or 4 years, and of course the next album would reveal that he was tired of that sound and had moved
Mm-hmm.
on. But I still wanted that. Um, I have to say something about Paisley Park because of that. Like it just to me it had all of those elements that I was looking for. But my favorite song was "The Condition of the Heart." And
Really?
Yeah, and I think it was because of the complexity of the composition and the songwriting, the storytelling, the metaphors of daisies in your yard, you know, which I think would be called back in Nothing Compares to You.
Mm.
Um, um, the way that the song takes maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes to actually like start in a second movement, right? And his vocals. There Prince is doing octave jumping in his vocals. He's going from like this falsetto down into his deep down into his falsetto, and you know, like that showcased his singing in a way that I don't think his previous stuff had allowed him to do. So for all of those things, I mean, I just remember putting headphones on at night, closing my eyes, and imagining what a video for this song would have looked like. And it was basically a rom-com. Like it was just like a whole movie that
Yeah.
played out in this song. And so for that reason, I think that was my favorite song.
All right. Mr. Dash.
I end up blast on these, man. It's always hard. So this this record was where I like kind of got into Prince's world, right? I think we were all fans by Purple Rain, and this is where I was like, oh, he's doing something because I was a fan of everything before this. You know, I was listening whatever, Michael Jackson, all this kind of stuff, and it was like these were just artists I liked, and then this I was like, oh, this guy is on another level doing something. So it was where the turn happened for me. So this record is very, very special. And I kind of have two eras of loving this album. One was like as a kid discovering Prince, really, and then coming back to it as an adult. And also it's impossible in that broader feeling for me to detach it from the B-sides, because the B-sides are every bit the peers of this album. I mean, I think we'll get into that. So that's like, it's really like I almost any of the B-sides is ahead of any almost of the album tracks for me in terms of favorite song. Like She's Also My Hair or Girl. I mean, those are just so good. So that's like all the footnotes. But in terms of like least favorite, like I loved when the album first came out, I loved Tambourine. And I was like, that's funky and it's transgressive, all the stuff that Elliot always loves. It's hard for me to argue now that there's that much substance to it. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not a lot of there. And you know, and then there would be these times I would revisit it, like when Trent Reznor sampled it, you know, and that was 10 years later. I was like, oh, look, something's going on. You know what I mean? And not even 10 years later, it was like 5 years later. And so I was like, you know, oh, he did the thing, and like he knows he's in on the joke too, you know, and like that was kind of cool. But it wasn't that deep, kind of. Um, and and so like that, I think that's probably the thing that's hardest for me to be like to defend as like is as great as the greatness on some of the other tracks. Um, favorite, if we just stick to album cuts, see, even that's hard because I was going to say America, but it's because of the 12-inch, right? Like because it's colored by like the experience I had with America was years later. I got my driver's license, got to uh, a record store. I didn't know, this is before, you know, the fandom and the internet and all that stuff, and found the 12-inch and didn't know about it. Like I knew that it had a 12-inch, but I didn't know that it was 20 minutes long. And so found the record and was like, oh shit, here it is. You know what I mean? It was just like, here's the gem. They got one left. I'm gonna get this. Nobody knows about it. Run home and put it on. And it just kept going. Right. And so like the sheer joy of that is like, this is the greatest song I've ever heard. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just sort of like, and also by that time the revolution had broken up. Right. So like that was sort of it. So like I was like, this is the best song on the album. So it's hard to say that, but on its merits of the album itself, um, even there, it's sort of like the last half of the title track, because that was Minneapolis Funk. Right. You know, so like even there, it's sort of or the first half of Temptation, right? Because these songs morph and change, and then like the most like the the sort of most screamy part of Condition of the Heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in each of these cases, I think it's not it's moments, and I think because
Okay.
almost all of these songs are suites, and so I think that's different from all the other songs that I'd felt about Prince before. So this is a terrible answer, but that's the real answer.
Yeah.
Arthur, can I chime in for a second? Just
Please.
a quick aside, but going to No's point about like having the surprise of discovering the America 12-inch. When this album was out, even though I was reading Billboard or reading different magazines, I didn't realize that Paisley Park was a single in the UK. And so I kind of had a surprise many years later of discovering like the Paisley Park 12-inch, and it
Yes,
was
yeah.
extended, and I was like, yo, like there's Prince
Where they've been
stuff that
hiding
I
this.
have not like,
Yes.
oh, you know, like it was a buried treasure that was a surprise to me that I didn't know was out there, because of
I
course
didn't get that till
until
I was online.
yeah,
That was one where
exactly.
I didn't
This is
know
like
until we
pre-internet.
were
I didn't know
virtual crate
until
digging. Yeah.
Yeah.
totally. I didn't know until 21st century. So that was wild to me.
Well, I just want to say,
Talking about this, right?
yes.
I
Oh,
am.
come on.
Yeah.
I
All right.
am.
Flex.
So that's what we got to do now. We got to bring our vinyl and like flex.
Props.
This is what we got to
we
do.
had to have
For the
props.
flex.
Just wanted to clarify the man's position.
Mine is over there. I would have to go get it.
I just wanted to clarify the man's position.
Indeed.
Zaire, mine is in the other room, but I will. But I will say, to respond to Anil, I actually got that like not online, like in a physical record store. And today is Record Store Day. So I just want to shout out, you want to support your local record stores, because there were a couple record stores in Georgia who always had all the Prince bootlegs, had all the Prince imports. You can't forget about Tower Records, which was incredible for imports.
Yeah.
So like it was really an incredible time for the 12 inches, and also learning about the German, like, you know, Le Red Corvette 12-inch versus the UK Paisley. Like it was really a really amazing time. But and also I just want to say, Anil, you know, I I never articulated what you just said in my mind, but now I understand more why I love Around the World in a Day. It's because all the songs are like sweets. Like they don't stay in one place. And that's the kind of music that I love. Like another artist that I love a lot is 24/7 Spies. If you know 24/7 Spies, like their songs are very sweet. Like they go from hard rock to jazz to all of that. And so like these songs are like that, and I love that, except for the end of
There,
Temptation.
there was an interesting thing to me about you talking about Raspberry Beret being too pop. And what I've seen is like the later songs, because these songs are written over like 5, 6 years, are so much more sophisticated in his songwriting. Because you look at Computer Blue, right? And he had sort of done this later in the Purple Rain evolution, and it's one of those suites, and it's got that sophistication to it. But Raspberry Beret is written between uh Something in the Water and How Come You Don't Call Me, and this is almost 4 years prior to that, and
Yeah.
it is a little more of a traditional structure.
He's gotten really
Right.
good at writing pop songs by this time.
Yeah, but the
Really good.
maturity comes 3, 4 years over the course of touring and playing with the Revolution, all the other things he's doing, and he's able to do these multi structured songs, and then when he revisits the songs like Raspberry Beret, and he sings in the 12 inches and in the remixes and in the revisitation, they get these additional segments and structures.
On Cleanup, this won't take long because the album ends at Pop Life for me. So as far as like least favorite between Ladder and Temptation, it can be either one. The Ladder sounded like a just a weaker version of Purple Rain is just so strong, and so we sort of had this also ran, if you will, and then
Did you say
Temptation.
also ran?
I did, and Temptation is the conversation with God. I saw the Purple Rain tour in March of '85. Around the World in a Day comes out, what, 6, 7 weeks later, max? And it's like, Blue Eyed Jesus, I just saw this conversation played out. I don't need to see it, again. Favorite was a little more difficult. If I had the choice, I would really want to say Tambourine. it was almost impossible for me to make associations between some music that was on Purple Rain and some music that was on Around the World in a Day. The latter, Purple Rain, Raspberry Beret, Take Me With You. And even when Doves Cry to Tambourine, just from the fundamental structure of this is Prince singing over a drum beat with sparse synths in the case of Tambourine, strong synth in the case of When Doves Cry. But When Doves Cry, that's the unicorn song. That there's no comparison in that way. Um, but I gotta say, Pop Life is my favorite song off of this album. It
Okay.
feels it feels the the warmest, if you will. Um, there's no I don't want to use the word shtick because that's so demeaning. That's not what that is. But I don't I don't need to subscribe to a world to listen to Pop Life. Whereas the title track, Paisley Park, Condition of the Heart, and even Raspberry Beret. Raspberry Beret has that Purple Rain world motif in the structure, the making out in the barn and the girl and getting on the back of my bike, and et cetera. And Pop Life sounded like where I expected him to be, in 1985, before knowing that he records the music so much, earlier. Sheila E's playing drums. There was this communal factor, to it. And it felt like Prince without the window dressing that we had seen throughout Purple Rain and award shows and public appearances on television and things like that. So
I want to
that's
say something
me.
about the ladder slander.
Well,
I will say, so like the ladder is such a beautiful, has the beautiful makings of a gospel song. I
mhm.
love the string openings. There's definitely a room for a choir, but I will grant the lyrics don't live up to what the music promises. Like, I don't want to hear about Electra and her subject and like this, like,
Right.
I just really don't, right? Like,
I'm like, huh?
yeah, this could have been,
Are we
this
talking
could
about
have,
Daredevil's Electra? Who are we talking
right.
about?
You know, like
Right. Thank you.
I mean, I love the refrain and chorus of the latter, like all the steps in between. Like, I think that there was promise in the lyrics that just the story fell apart. But the music was, I think, just promised this really uplifting choral, like it could have been, but it wasn't. So but I will
Mhm.
never slander that song like you have so viciously.
All right. Moving along in the interest of time. Uh, so we know Around the World in a Day, it was released very quickly after the end of the Purple Rain tour, almost in a surprise fashion, if you will. And it's very difficult to divorce all of our feelings of Purple Rain when this album comes out. And so but it also makes me wonder that if Around the World did, let me rephrase. Should Prince have ridden the Purple Rain train until the wheels fell off? We know that Purple Rain was intended to be a world tour. The t-shirts, Prince on the Revolution World Tour 1984-1985, right? He could have gone to Europe with this album. He could have gone to Japan with this album. There arguably was room for at least one more single from Purple Rain. Could have been the Beautiful Ones, maybe even Computer Blue. There seemed to be a little more water left in the sponge that Prince could have squeezed out of Purple Rain. Was that a mistake? What was the consequence of not moving forward all the way out and exhaust the potential of Purple Rain? I'll start.
Sure.
Um, I do think that if Prince continued the Purple Rain tour into 1985, I don't believe that we would have gotten Parade. Take Under the Cherry Moon off the table just for a second. But I don't think that it would have given him the room to develop the music that Parade manifested. Obviously, he can record on the road. Obviously, he's still writing songs. Obviously. But I'm saying the fact that he didn't have to do a tour, that this album was done, ready to rock, gave him the space to be as creative as he wanted to be and act on that creativity in the moment. And I think that's what gets us. That's what gets us Parade. And if he continues on with the tour, it doesn't happen. We get something else.
Right. I mean, I would say that I often, especially as a teenager, wanted Prince to be as massive as possible, right? I wanted every album to sell what Purple Rain sold or to affect as many people, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this was said at the time that Around the World in a Day was sort of released to throw off all the fans that like had glommed onto him during Purple
Mm-hmm.
Rain, like the corny people, to sort of get rid of the people who, weren't like really getting it, or who were just jumping on the
Right.
bandwagon because he was the hottest thing,
Mm-hmm.
in 1984. And it sort of cleared the slate a bit for him, to not have to not be under the pressure, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
making every album a thriller, no pun intended, or pun intended, I guess, like I know that Michael went back to the studio with post-it notes on the mirror in the morning that said like 100 million, because he wanted
Mm-hmm.
Bad to outsell Thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Prince was not setting those kind of expectations for himself, to his credit, and so in that sense, like, yeah, I'm glad that he didn't uh run it till the wheels fell off, like he had bigger creative fish to fry, and having made Purple Rain even more of a monster probably would have been a mistake.
Elliot, any thoughts?
I mean, you all kind of said some of that. Although Arthur, I hadn't thought about what you brought up in terms of Parade, and I mean, I think it's an accurate statement, which is why I totally would have not have milked Purple Rain any more than it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think for, as Miles said, right, that's the I mean, we've already kind of opened up the box earlier. Miles did this in the first question, but like that would be the Thriller kind of approach, right? And that would be the standard approach, right? That would be the standard musician on radio, is that, you release a massive and you just do all the singles, you go on the tour and you let that album breathe, and then you wait a while and then you go on to whatever this next project. And that wasn't Prince. And so I think milking it, doing it, having Purple Rain longer than what it needed to be would not have been true to how Prince had been doing things. It wouldn't have been true to his artistry, right? We're talking obviously about an album a year, all these things, all these side projects. It was very much kind of on to the next and on to the next. I think also because, you know, um, I was thinking, Miles, you sort of interviewed him, and you know this, but we all, I think, know this as well. But like Prince not wanting to talk about the past, not wanting to kind of look backwards. And so Purple Rain comes out in '84, and now we're in '85, and you want still more from that thing that came out previously. It's just not him. And so moving forward, going on to a next project is, I think, the right move. And my lukewarm embrace of the album actually has nothing to do about Purple Rain. That's not how things kind of work for me. As I think, really sort of, Neil, you mentioning it, that this is much like a suite, and I think that's a great framing, and I hadn't thought about that. I still don't know if I would still be into that album, because every time I listen to it, it takes me such a long time to get into it. That's my personal thing when it comes to that album. It doesn't immediately grab me, and I'm waiting for it, and it's just this kind of delayed gratification for me, right? I know, again, I'm on an island of one when it comes to this. but
It's just refreshing that it's you and not
it's,
Miles.
and this is the thing. But like Parade is that album that also kind of makes me uneasy, but in a good way. I'm actually that's the thing that I think is really interesting to me
Mm-hmm.
when I think of, and I shouldn't compare these two albums, but I'm thinking about these two albums because both in terms of teaching, but also in terms of listening, I talk about how a kind of deterritorializing in both albums. That obviously the kind of initial sound of Around the World in a Day takes you out of the kind of Minneapolis sound, although we get to it in sort of near the end when because Prince wants to dance. And and really Parade does a similar kind of we're going to move you to a different place.
Mm-hmm.
And for me at least, I'm a bit more curious about where this is going on Parade than I am when it
Sure.
comes to Around the World in a Day. And part of the thing is, and I know I'm really kind of deviating from your question, is I think the hooks don't. That's the thing that doesn't grab me. I think initially, that's the thing that doesn't quite hit me in the beginning, and that's why I think it's difficult for me to kind of grasp the album. That being said, right, despite my own kind of personal feelings, I think Around the World in a Day is um the kind of correct artistic statement to particular kind of make here. Because it like I said earlier, it is that album that says, I'm not like these other folks on the radio, right? I'm not like Michael, I'm not like Madonna, I'm not like all these other folks who let these albums breathe
Mm-hmm.
and do all these other kinds of things to promote this album.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me. If you thought that that was me, this album will show you that it's not me. And I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think part I want to get into here is one that we have. Everybody has their album they don't connect with. Is part of what it is to be somebody that
Mm-hmm.
appreciates him, and part of it
Mm-hmm.
is and if you don't like this, I got another under another alias, under another protege. I got something for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think also one of the animating forces we see now in retrospect is how much he was about, ironically because of Janet, control, right? And so like one of the things he could always do to make sure that he had control and was authoring his narrative and his life was to keep pushing forward. So whether it was I'm not looking back and I'm not being retrospective and I'm not letting anyone else have control over my work, my ownership, my art, is there's always something new. Because we look, by the time you get to the final Warner Brothers albums in 2014, he
Mm-hmm.
was not playing songs from those records at the release party, right? Right. Like, forget like I'm on to the next album. I'm not even on this album. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
like that's like the next level. And I think there's a part of like some of that's even the unhealthy level of
Mm-hmm.
not acknowledging where I'm at, right? Like when he had his sort of greatest losses and pains where he's just in straight denial, right? Like that level of detachment. But some of that is I am the author, I have the agency, I am the person who determines what we are doing here. No label, no outside, not fans. Like you
Mm-hmm.
also are not in control. And I think that is one of the things too about, yeah, in the positive, I think in the affirmative sense, it is I'm not a prisoner to uh, the trappings of hyper celebrity, of the superstardom, and of
Mm-hmm.
the like you're supposed to keep milking that thing
Like he
dry.
wants to say just below level of water, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah, because
below.
you don't have control of that. When the machine gets that big, you are not in control. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows it. And I think he was skeptical of superstardom for all the other reasons. Think of how many times he went after mocking Elvis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a refrain multiple times over multiple decades for him. And I think those things were there, even though he was curious about Elvis and curious about Marilyn Monroe and curious about
Mm-hmm.
Clara Bow,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think he's like in dialogue with those things. But I think some of it, like it was again, the best and worst or the scariest and bravest things about us are right adjacent to each other. And so I think part of how he's navigating that is he knew his life was out of his control in those ways. And you seize back control by being like, I've thrown away that, I've cut my hair, I've cut my ties, I'm on to the next.
It's interesting as I'm hearing this conversation and of course thinking about the song America that I have to present on in the next session. Shameless plug. Um, um, and I think the way Prince framed Around the World in a Day and the way I think some people have talked about is this sort of departure from Purple Rain. And in many ways, I see Purple Rain as a departure from a trajectory that started with Dirty Mind, in the sense that in For You and Prince, we were in his bedroom. Dirty Mind brings us out of his bedroom into the world, right? And progressively, Dirty Mind Controversy 1999, we're seeing Prince encounter the world and talk about the world and talk about society and talk about these people that he is, seeing and meeting, etc. Purple Rain like returns to an insularity that's self-contained for the movie, right? It's about these relationships, it's about the bedroom again. Not really a lot about the world, right? Around the World in a Day returns us back to the world. And so it's interesting, like as Arthur, as you talked about, there were songs that you had to like enter into Prince's world to understand. I didn't really hear them that way. I heard this is Prince's way of encountering the world. There is a lot of commentary going on here that is significant. I think Under the Cherry Moon, even though, and we'll talk about that next year, even though there is this kind of shift in geography, as Elliot points out, the world is still very much present. And then we see progressively a continued, this is the emergence of a citizen, right? Of a civic actor, of someone in the world who is navigating how to talk about the world on their own terms. So I see Around the World in a Day as Prince is returning back to a narrative kind of trajectory that he started with Dirty Mind. Sonically, different things are happening, yes. Stylistically, aesthetically, there are different kinds of continuities and breaks and disruptions. But in terms of like, you know, at this point, Around the World in a Day is the most worldly Prince album that has come out for many reasons, right? And I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit because remember, he's coming out on the sting of having not shown up for that recording of We Are the World, right? And people are like, this is a self-indulgent asshole celebrity, insular in his own world. Mind you, Around the World in a Day has been cooking since.
That's my thing. It's
Right, like it's been cooking all
we're
along.
reacting to
Right.
something that
Right.
was created before any
Exactly.
of that.
So
even
so a lot
happened.
of that criticism was unfair, which I'll get into. But I still see again Around the World today as a continuation of the narrative's trajectory that started with, for me, Dirty Mind, in terms of Prince entering into the world, where I saw Purple Rain as a slight detour from that, because it was all about like this self-contained, like world essentially.
All right. Any more thoughts on this before
I
I hit you with it?
I just want to say that I'm glad that he didn't ride Purple Rain until the wheels fell off. I was so used to an album every year because I started with Dirty Mind, so 80, 81, 82. No album in 83. I was like, what the? And then we get 84. So I wanted my 85 because I was like, I don't like this skipping, a year kind of thing. But also, he has so much music inside of him, as we know, with all like the B-sides and all the side projects, that anytime that he could release music was a good thing. And so I'm really, really happy that he did it. For me personally, especially in real time, with not sophisticated ears, because up until that point, I was listening to a lot of funk. I was basically listening to what my uncles and aunts were listening to. They were listening to a lot of funk and a lot of rock. So, your Led Zeppelins, your Pink Floyds, your, P-Funk, of course, your James Brown. And I was listening to a lot of gospel from my grandparents. So for me, again, I'm talking about in real time, as a 15-year-old, I thought this was one of the most musically sophisticated albums I had ever heard in my life. Because like it was not pop, with the exception of like Raspberry Beret. And very much it felt like Prince was really trying to expand his sound. And the thing, like, you know, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I probably will go off on a tangent. Like, I don't think Prince wanted to create, quote unquote, the Minneapolis sound. People, like, whoever coined that term, I don't know who coined the term. Whenever someone says Minneapolis sound, I usually go, you mean Prince? And what I mean by that is that if you truly think that Prince is a Minneapolis sound, then you would know that that sound changes every year, right? But most people, when they say Minneapolis sound, they're really talking about, you know, the LM1 as well as using horns through the keyboards. And that was just, you know, only a moment. So it was, and you got that, you know, with Jesse in terms of taking that and running with it. But you like, depending on like what your definition of Minneapolis sound is, and my definition of Minneapolis sound equals Prince equals different every time versus trying to get that same thing. And I thought that this album was really brilliant in terms of following Purple Rain. Because to be honest, as a 15-year-old, I was really afraid that Prince was gonna finally play it safe. Like he was gonna come. And my prayer, I kid you not, I would pray and say, please, God, please let Prince continue to let his freak flag fly high. I do not want him to become this huge commercial behemoth. And it's just like when Around the World in a Day came out, I was like, thank you, God. You know, like he did not do that because he could have easily have just done Purple Rain too. Yeah, and a lot of people would have been happy. I wouldn't have been happy, but a lot of other people would have been happy. So I think it was really daring for him. And also probably a part, you know, as we've already talked about, a little bit to keep his sanity. I mean, I think there's a reason why he always lived in predominantly in Minneapolis, like why he didn't like move, you know, remove himself from Minneapolis and like just live in LA all the time or live in New York, because he needed that insularity in terms of just geography, you know, in terms of just being, so I don't know. I think it's a brilliant album. And actually in preparation for this, because I hadn't listened to Around the Rolling Day as an album, because I usually pull out the 12 inches. Like when I want to listen to Around the Rolling Day, I pull out, you know, America 12 inch. I pull out Hello. I even like, I love Girl. And so yes, so for me, it's more about the 12 inches than the album. But when I started listening to this for this, I was like, oh my God, this is such a brilliant album. I personally think it's really great. I think it does take, going back to what Elliot was talking about, it's not very accessible in terms of especially putting on Around the World in a Day, having that, you know, the finger symbols and like the sitar and all that. Like it, you have to be in a certain mood sometimes. Like it's not like immediate, but if you just let it simmer, it just
Simmer.
yeah, just sit still for a minute and just really listen to it, because we don't have the same listening practices as we did when we were, at least I don't, as teenagers. I would not multitask. I would be laying on the floor, laying on the couch, just listening to this album, reading the liner notes. Yes, reading the liner notes. And like, this was an amazing experience in real time.
I want to quickly just say this random story, but this is me also giving props to this album. Is like a few weeks ago, I got picked up by this Uber, and the driver was playing an oud, and the driver was just playing it. And so I hop in, and he's starting to play. He was like, "Can you guess what this instrument is?" And I'm like, "It's the oud." And he's like, "How do you know it's the oud?" And I was like, Prince, like that was my answer. Was like Prince and this album. So like that is a thing, because he was like, no, everyone guesses this out, and I was like, yeah, no, I know it's an oud because Prince and Around the World, and like that does, it has come in handy in moments like that. But that's the one quick story I wanted to share about that.
All right. I got another question. In the interest of time, I want to try to get this question in, and even a lightning round question in. You know, 85 and this period of you know, transition. I wonder what we think the most consequential event was that Prince needed to involve himself in. And at the at the front of the year, we have him not showing up for the We Are the World recording session. We have Big Chick grabbing up a photographer who tries to get in the limo after the American Music Awards, while Prince is actually, like at a restaurant while they're recording We Are the World. So we have a PR mess over here. We have the later lawsuit against the Prince Spaghetti Company
Right.
for creating a commercial under the guise of a Prince concert. And when the spotlight comes on, it's like spaghetti sauce. He's parodied on Saturday Night Live as a result of that, Prince being played by Billy Crystal at the time. Um, and he's got Tipper Gore and her network talking about Darling Nikki and making Prince the poster child of explicit lyrics, sex, and even Satanism in rock and roll music. Um, so he's got all of that. And to respond to that, which I don't think he's ever done, well, certainly by that time, so directly, he's responding to some of these incidents in the song Hello, the B-side to Pop Life. He agrees to do a cover story for Rolling Stone, where he's addressing some of these things. He later agrees to do a sit-down interview, kind of using that in quotes, for MTV. I use it in quotes only because the actual questioning was done by his manager, Steve Farnolli, but the material, the questions themselves, were submitted by MTV, at least according to VJ Mark Goodman. So here's Prince moving forward, but he's still having to address these past experiences from, an era and even a persona that he's not even on right now. So I know that was a mouthful, but what do you think the most consequential event was for Prince in 1985?
I mean, I kind of want to speak about We Are the World. Part of what really drew me to Prince at the time was that he was cool. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
aside from his persona as the kid in Purple Rain, and aside from the bevy of beautiful women that he was always kind of involved with, at least uh, from a media perspective or whatever, he was like, it was just as a teenager starting high school, whatever. Like the fact that this cat did not go to the We Are the World thing and went to a club instead, and like that snub was just like how could he do like it just was, it made me giddy. Like how could he do that? He's really not gonna go. Wow. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And then he got in trouble because of the incident at the nightclub and all of that. But it just led to his aura of cool to me. The fact that Around the World in a Day came out and he was saying that there weren't going to be any singles from it and there weren't going to be
Mm-hmm.
any videos recorded from it,
Mm-hmm.
like all of that just made me more in his corner. I was just like, the balls on this guy. Like, wow, like
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I can't imagine any other pop star, doing. And yeah, he folded and he did do the videos and he did do the singles, but
Mm-hmm.
for him to drop it like that, for him to take such a left turn with this record, knowing that it would still go triple platinum at least based on, people just being curious from the behemoth of Purple Rain. Um, it built up like who he stood for in my mind, which was just cool. I mean, in retrospect, some of that stuff might have been a little douchey or whatever, but like, he was a rock star. He was doing rock star shit. And
Mm-hmm.
I respected that, it drew me closer to him as a fan.
Yeah,
I
I
did
think
find
that
it.
there's, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
please. No, 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 please go.
I think there's a part that's interesting to look at through the fluency and the vocabulary we have now for talking about these things, right? Because I think if you were talking about a camera tried to get in my car now, through the lens we have on consent, through the lens we have on public image, right? Where celebrities have a vocabulary for talking about this now, right? A 26-year-old celebrity now would say, like, you non-consensually came into my space and you took my image without my consent, and you physically, you physically touched me without my consent, which are all things that happened. People would have a very, very different conversation, right? Let alone SNL doing blackface at the top of the show to come at you, right? Right? People would have a very, and obviously we're in the midst of the backlash to that, but people at least would have a vocabulary about it. And I think part of it was like not having at sort of peak of Reagan era the framing for talk about it. And interestingly, Prince does actually, when he puts out Hello, have exactly the right framing and fluency in it, and nobody else did, right? Like Michael, by the time he gets to Leave Me Alone, which is years later, has Leave Me Alone, but it's a sort of self-pitying, it's about himself, and I'm hurt, which he was, and that's okay. But he doesn't actually have he's not walking you through the logic. A camera tried to get in my car, in my bed, right? And I think it's really interesting because Prince is laying out the logic of intrusion and violation, which is a horizontal statement, is a universally applicable statement about wrong and right. And then the same thing is true in what are our principles about whom we feed and what is performative or not of USA for Africa versus, like, we are always against children being hungry, and we do always take care of children as a matter of fact.
Right. And I
And you
have
are
a
being
record.
performative. Our record stands tall. We know who we are. We know what our values are, and we are consistent. And not only are you hypocrites, you're being performative. Right. So he goes really, really consistently through the values, which again is this thing, like you look at, like, people who are young activists now, one of the great things about them is they start with the principle, not the performance. And then they are incredibly skeptical of people who start with performance over principle. Right. And Prince just intuitively did that. Right. And I think that's a thing where, like, of course he puts it poetically and it rhymes and it's got a good beat and, all the things that he's going to do. But it's such a contrast to, I don't want to over-index on Michael Jackson, but Michael Jackson's thing was this, like, I was hurt. Right. And so both in Leave Me Alone in the bad era, and then obviously everything in the history era I mean, even uh in the Invincible era, Michael's got a song where the last minute is just him singing Leave Me Alone over and over and over. And then he's got a song called Leave Me Alone, right? And it's very much about him being wounded, right? But it's not a statement of principle. Like, he'll evoke wrongs and harms that have happened to people, but he's not saying this is the thing that we do and walking you through the logic of it. So I think that contrast is really striking to draw. And yet, like, Prince could sort of rise above me, like, I'm still going to give you a song for that record, and I'm still participating. I'm not, maligning your motivations. Maybe it's legit and it's valid. And also he recognized he's not going to win on, like, they're, they're full of shit, right? Like, he's not actually pulling them apart and doing that thing. I think it was just such a thoughtful and incisive way to go through it. And that's sort of the thing that you see replicated when he begins, fighting the labels, in the early 90s, is like the same thing. He's talking about all artists. So, like, people couldn't get past Slave on His Face or whatever, but he articulated the principles really clearly in his way, right? And people couldn't sort of see through the poetry of it, and the some of it was an insular kind of thing. But I think that's the part where I really, even as a kid, was like, you guys aren't listening to him, and he's saying something really principled and clear. And I think that sense of what bonded us to him as fans was, like, the music is self-explanatory, the principles are really clear. And I was so indignant about that then. I still am, apparently. And so I think that thing was like, you all aren't listening, you don't get it, but he's absolutely right. And now we've seen the documentary about We Are the World. We saw how Sheila felt used and was used. We saw the manipulation of the people that wanted to put this stuff on camera, and truth will out.
I want to quickly just kind of hit on something that you mentioned, Anil, that I think Arthur brings together both the We Are the World moment, but also the Tipper Gore moment. And that is both of those kinds of initiatives were focused around children, right? Of course, in terms of We Are the World, it's about sort of children in like Ethiopia starving during this famine. For Tipper Gore and the PMRC, it's about this kind of dangers of rock music to youth. And Prince is caught in the fray of both, right? Both are framing Prince as this kind of artist who actually doesn't care about the youth, who might be a kind of danger from the danger for the youth, either from creating music that is sort of satanic or what have you, or it's like you're not contributing to this kind of charity single, and so you clearly don't care about the youth. And to go to Anil's point, right, it's ignoring not only Prince's music, that we can go back to, Party Up, right? As a particular kind of anti-war song, but an anti-war song talking about like youth are not going to be fighting this war for you, right? And so we can trace that from 1980 even to the present, and not only talking about a song like Hello, and not to perhaps anticipate what sort of Renaissance here might talk about in the next session, but that America is also a song about youth, and it's about America's Black youth, right? And so here's Prince again in multiple instances on record, and I mean that in all senses of that, talking about how he's dedicated to affirming youth. Right. This is obviously coming even before we get sort of new power generation and those kinds of things. But there's a direct investment that Prince has in cultivating, uplifting, and affirming youth worldwide, that it's baffling to kind of see both the kind of critiques for him not participating in We Are the World, and for Tipper Gore as framing Prince as this kind of danger to youth, given not only the music, but I also think about, and I can't remember if it's 84 or sort of 85, when he performs at Gallaudet in DC, which is a youth school for the deaf and hard of hearing, right? So this is also Prince in doing sort of these philanthropic activities that are geared toward, right? We have multiple instances of this. And yet we have this moment in 1985 where folks are framing Prince as someone who doesn't care about the youth. And it is one of those. So for me, they're both connected. Yeah.
The August 3rd, 83 show was a Minnesota Dance Theater benefit, right?
Exactly.
So the song Purple Rain, the signature songs of his career don't exist without him performing to support kids learning.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I think it's like so fundamental to his career, and people don't understand it. And then the level of indignation he could have had, and he never flexed, like he never put that card out there.
Right.
He never said, like he never gave the receipts that he had.
I just want to, since we're talking about Hello, which I think is a really the extended version of Hello that ends in that rap, loose rap, is just really, really brilliant. It's this call for empathy. It's this call to think about how we use speech. I once think I said somewhere that like today's people who use social media need to study that. He does a play on how people made fun of his clothes. He says, I wish you were in my shoes.
Right.
He was like, but words are not like shoes because they're probably too high, you'll fall off and die. Your words are like tools of destruction. And I think there's just like a brilliant framing there. It's poetic. It's also a rebuttal to the ways that people made fun of him about his height, about what he wore, but even more deeply, a call for empathy. Like, think about the words that you use. And, he would revisit this idea of words in Billy Jack Bitch, right? In terms of the words that people use, and the idea that a celebrity or someone who is a public figure is somehow not entitled to empathy or is not human, or is not entitled to a sense of privacy or a sense of space. Like I think as Anil has pointed out, it's, that song anticipates, and the controversies around that song that song kind of emerges out of, anticipates a lot of the media generated cultural, I'm just going to say, pathologies that we find ourselves in today. And so I think that, that song Hello just has like a lot of insight to offer us.
Yeah, I want to throw
Mm.
out some factoids. That well, so it went over my head when Hello was released that it's got the same title as one of Lionel Richie's biggest songs, Hello. You know what I mean? And Lionel Richie being the co-writer of We Are the World. I don't know if that was intentional or whatever, but like when I heard about Hello and when I heard Hello, I didn't even make that connection. Not to mention that Hello is on Can't Slow Down, right? Which beat Purple Rain for the Grammy of the Year, didn't it? In the '84, or didn't that happen? So just like little factoids for those who weren't there at the time.
I think my answer would be the interview that he did on MTV, and uh, I say that for like on a couple of levels. There were a couple of questions that I thought were just dumb, and it had to do specifically with the Jimi Hendrix comparison, and uh, you know there was something else that kind of ran off the rails. But specifically, there was a question that had to do with Prince responding to criticisms of leaving his Black audience to pursue white rock audiences. And even at 14, without the strong mechanics to be able to discern the problem that I really had with it, I really took offense of asking a question like that as an organization who was a gatekeeper of what music got played on MTV in the first place. So by setting a bar, and I remember the David Bowie pressing Mark Goodman about, and Mark Goodman was kind of like the low key, kind of like the Prince guy, go-to guy for MTV. He hosted the MTV premiere party for Purple Rain. He was the one that would kind of like introduce the big videos and such. Raspberry Beret was one of them. Um, but Bowie was pressing Mark Goodman about, okay, well, why don't you play more, Black artists on your channel, and Mark gave, the company line. Okay. But I just felt like, okay, so you're asking Prince, who met your bar with Little Red Corvette, getting Little Red Corvette played on MTV, opening the door for Michael Jackson to later get his videos played on MTV. But then you're turning right around and criticizing him, questioning him on meeting and succeeding this bar at the expense of your core Black audience. How do you feel about that? And it resonated with me in the same kind of way that the around the world, I mean, around the world, but the We Are the World criticism resonated, where, well, wait a minute, you're criticizing this guy for not showing up for the session, but he said he already had a conversation where he was going to contribute a song, and you all were okay with that. But then later, during Live Aid, the international broadcast of the two concerts, one being held in London, England, the other being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Prince has a video of For the Tears in Your Eyes, the song that he submitted for the project, and there's no fanfare about that in the same kind of way. And it's not about Prince per se, you know, but Live Aid wasn't about Phil Collins either. And there was like a big play on the fact that Phil Collins was playing a show in London that morning, jumping on a Concorde and playing, the evening show thereafter. And oh, by the way, we got this Prince video that kind of came in, too. Um, I feel that, speaking to how Prince never really showed his receipts, he kind of kept that close to invest. I just, as an adult man now, I just feel that that's just an enormous amount of maturity for a 26, 27-year-old who is juggling, who's really spinning plates. You're not juggling them like stuff's going. He's spinning these plates, making a film, making a new album, promoting the current album, dealing with the bullshit from the previous iteration of his work. It's a profound amount of control of his own space that he's creating for himself.
Can
So,
I'm gonna add something to that. Sorry, I didn't know if you were. Can I add something to that? I mean, I think it's
oh no,
maturity,
please.
but it's maturity, but and um, I think now talking about Prince, the uh, the we'll say the elephant in the room
Mm,
is the documentary, and it makes me think about Prince in this way. Like, yes, significant maturity, skill, strategy, and also what kind of impact did that pressure have on that 26-year-old
mm, mm,
human
mm,
being
mm,
to be talked about in the way that he didn't see himself or he didn't understand himself, to be derided, to, like, I think we just assume everyone has thick skin, or even
mm,
if they project a certain kind of confidence on stage, that they're not impacted. And to have the whole world just kind of see you in a certain way that you don't see yourself, and then have to kind of carry that, right? Have to be driven by like your own artistic voice and vision, and then also hear people like constantly, attack you essentially. I just from like a human perspective, I know we always focus on Prince, the artist, and the music, and there's a tendency to not see that there's a person here who, a 26-year-old. I don't know how many of us remember that, or who has not attained that level yet of being a 26-year-old, but like not being equipped, right,
right,
to
right.
handle this in a mature way. And I think we've talked about how the responses, whether it's in the song Hello or in that interview, reflect a significant amount of discipline in order to get through this. And I think even talking or hearing Prince's peers talk about him as being extremely disciplined in terms of how he worked. And I think, and also to think about, this person was someone who did not come up in a secure home life,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
someone
mm-hmm.
who moved around a lot, and you know launched into this industry at a very young age. And I think we just kind of marvel at all of that. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to add that dimension to that, right? Like the enormous pressure to have had to carry that, and you know how does that get processed? I think the music, right, reflects
Right,
part of that
right.
The,
processing.
Mm-hmm,
But it's also, that's a hell of a lot for anyone to carry.
the
mm,
other thing to keep in mind with the song Paisley Park having been created is we're headed towards Paisley Park, the label and the business and the building starting to be created, right? So what you're talking about as a 26-year-old also is he's easily 100 people on payroll at this time
mm,
after the
mm,
Purple Rain tour.
mm,
He's easily got conservatively a $50 million company under PRN Productions at this time, right? And so he's gone from 5, 6 years earlier, he's in tour buses, and it's the first time that he's just started to recoup. And
mm,
he's probably, he'd had that Datsun 280, right? Where he's like probably, helped put some money in his mom's pocket and has been able to pay his bills. 5 years, right? So he's what, 5 years to the most money that anybody he has ever known in his entire life has had,
mm, mm,
managing more people than went to his entire high school class,
mm,
right? That are
mm,
working for him, that he's the boss, right? and already had people like Morris is already gone by now, right? He's already had people say, flip the table, I'm out of here. We're done. You changed. I'm done, right? Like heartbreak after heartbreak of people saying you sold out, people saying you're not, you're not still down with us, right? Like the level, like beyond the discipline, the communications, sort of individual level, think about like the number of people who've said, will you come and you got to pay off my car, you got to pay off my house. You're rich now,
Yeah.
right? Like this is all happening at the same time as he's recording a song every other day. And he's, and he's still got girls coming through, like all the other things that he's doing that are the things that we know of. He is, the biggest employer in his town.
Yeah.
If he's outside of, any of this Eden Prairie or Chanhassen or whatever, right? And so like I think that's the other part about the entrepreneurial thing that he was doing, right? Is somebody is coming alongside and being like, we need you to hire an architect for this complex that you want to build in Chanhassen at this point, right? And that's going alongside the family is blowing up. And what are we going to do with that, and how are we disentangling those, and what's the contract going to be for those things? And right, I think that's one of those things that is, yeah, I see in the chat, heavy wears a crown. I think that's exactly it, is this part of like we forget because of the level of ambition that he has at this time. But on top of what we know about him being prolific, on top of what we know about him being ambitious artistically, to do that he had to build such an extraordinary infrastructure that doesn't exist. And the thing that we always say about like when Minneapolis wasn't known and wasn't on the map for this kind of artistry, like you're having to level up to build that stuff. Like part of the reason you can have, 1 year later, Janet excelling at that level is he's building, with a lot of collaborators, so much infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. So I just always sort of come back to like how mind blowing that is, because the number of decisions you have to make just on a paperwork basis, right? Like, and you're still like pre-fax machine, right? Right. Doing that stuff. And people are just starting to get to FedEx stuff to Minneapolis. I'm just like, can't even fathom that stuff. That just blows my mind. And I'll give you one example, just not to ramble too much. A couple years back, I did an event at the Capitol Studios in LA. And I got to stand in that center studio where he did Temptation. And like that's like they had the mic where like Ella and Frank Sinatra and all them recorded, right? And I'm like, why was he here instead of Sunset Sound or all the places that he did it? And it's literally like somebody had a session over there. This is where David Leonard was, and he wanted to work with him, and they had the thing. And it's all this logistical stuff. It's literally just like who was busy when and who was available where, and like who could come through this thing. And you're like talking through this stuff of like, what is cost? What is the label going to pay for? Who's available when? Who's going to sign out this sheet? But long story short, he does all, as he always would, he does all of Temptation in one day. Eddie M is here to do the sax parts. I'm seeing this in this room. And this is also like the Beastie Boys recorded there. Like everybody does their stuff there. This is an incredible room with so much history. This is the only song he ever did there. And he had to figure out how to record in this thing, completely different console, different setup than he's ever used. And so I'm like, only one song is ever recorded by Prince in this room. And all of it is because of this whole set of complicated circumstances that's there. And he just rolls with it and does this song that is unbelievable. So I had them play the song in the room because I want to hear this. I want to hear Temptation in this room. And they were so great. They did for me. They like,
all right,
were super indulgent. But that was it. Was like, you adapt, right? And that's just like him being like, fuck it, give me whatever we need, because he could afford to at that time. But that level of like adaptiveness and resource and all that kind of stuff, I just like can't imagine when that kind of capability, in addition to he's got his piano, he's got his guitar, he's got the drum set, he's doing all that stuff on top of it.
Just
all right,
Arthur, I know we don't have that much time, but I just want to quickly say, since Anil mentioned him, we did have Eddie M as a keynote yesterday, and I was eternally grateful to have an opportunity to talk to Eddie M, because Eddie M doesn't get talked to enough. And as Anil just mentioned, he was on Temptation, only Prince and Eddie he was also on the ladder. And so I just think it's really important that we give all of these amazing musicians their flowers now. So like, if you don't mind, just, please go on Eddie M's Insta and just tell him, how much you appreciate him stopping by. I would be really grateful for that. All right, Arthur.
Okay. It looks like I can get my wish. I'm gonna get a quick lightning round in before we have to close. We've talked about around the world today, this whole session, and I do want to kind of broaden the view. And we just got through talking about ADM. You only get one song. What song are you taking? The Dance Electric or Love Bizarre?
That one's simple for me, even though it's really painful. The Dance Electric all day, every day.
Wow.
And I love me some Love Bizarre. In fact, I just played it for my students on Wednesday from Romance 1600 Live. It's one of my favorite performances that should be restored on 4K. Any performance of Prince should be restored. I personally think that entire Romance 1600 should, I mean, I don't even think it even got to DVD. It's just still hanging out there on VHS,
That's wild. That's
which
wild.
is like really wild. But the Dance Electric is, oh my, good morning, children. Take a look out your window. The world is falling. It's almost time to go. Dance, the rhythm of, I can recite the Dance Electric. And
Clearly.
I'm sure.
I am not a lyrics person, but when I heard that song, I was like, first of all, I was like, why did Prince give this song to Andre? It's an amazing song. But I'm glad that he did, because I love hearing Andre sing that song. But getting it on the originals was really special to me, like getting Prince's version. So, and I love Bizarre is amazing. It's a groove that I can't, but I don't even have to flinch. Dance Electric.
I'm going to say Dance Electric too. That's just like electro funk, soul gospel. That's just like Prince going bananas. Anyone that thinks that Prince is like, I don't know, just like a Kevin Saunderson, Detroit techno thing going on there. Like anyone who thinks that Prince could not do EDM, like that, that was just like, you hear it being born in that song.
Yeah, I would say Dance Electric as well. You know, when I think of the time period, I think of how I guess his songwriting was sort of changing and critics were comparing him to like 60 songwriters or maybe even accusing him of biting 60 songwriters. But like Manic Monday, for example, or Raspberry Beret, like, his sound was kind of changing, but it wasn't like he couldn't just give you a Dance Electric, and go to the top of the charts and be like strictly in that Minneapolis sound groove. He was like he was evolving beyond that and stretching his own sort of musical boundaries and doing what he felt like doing. But there were still purple grooves in the shelf or on the shelf, and he could easily just pull one down and give them to whomever. And I mean, he was still a master of that, but he was moving on. And but yeah, I mean, I still love that song. I mean, that above the other Sheila E joint. Although I love them both.
Why you gotta call it the other Sheila E joint? Like
it wouldn't this group wouldn't be what it be if Miles didn't
without
have to
some
shade
shade.
somebody. Exactly,
Right, yeah,
without Miles shading somebody. 4 for 4 on Dance Electric. I'm looking at the time, so everyone's already said it. So I'm also going with Dance Electric.
Is that here?
I already said Dance Electric. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Anil.
I'm just going to be contrary and go Love Bizarre. Part of the reason why is just remembering the one time at 3121 and Sheila was there and they're dancing around the room and they're like 3 feet away with Sheila and Prince and they were singing it and you're just like, come on, it's the best. They're the best. It's the best in the world. How are you not going to love that? So, to have them and literally just looking at you singing Love Bizarre, you're like, come on, that's a lifetime memory. So you can't beat that. If they had sang Dance Electric, though, I would have picked that.
I'm going with Love Bizarre.
Whoa.
So It's me and Dash.
Why?
You know, it's a. I was at that Sheila E show and
Ah,
I saw them.
Okay.
Oh,
I saw them do it,
oh my God.
and I've been effed up ever since. To be honest with you.
Oh my God. Yes. It's my
Yeah.
it's definitely in my what's really crazy is that two performances from 1985, or in terms of 85 songs that were released, are in my top 5 of all Prince live. Love Bizarre at that Romance 1600, that America video. I mean,
Yeah.
incredible. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm not hating, especially if you saw that live, Arthur.
Yeah. Because I mean, Dance Electric is just good God. You know, it's just like, what is, you know what I mean? And you know,
Thing I
but
love is we don't gotta choose.
yeah, yeah. And you know, Love Bizarre just has a groove that just does not stop, and you can lay anything, you know, on top of that. And you know, the impact of seeing this show. Purple Rain tour, he would duet off stage with Sheila E. And it's her band that's playing Erotic City, which just doesn't sound right. You know, at the Romance 1600 concert, I don't remember if she did Erotic City. I just don't, you know, but I remember what was the Saturday Night Live that Sheila E had guested on, was the musical guest, and they did Love Bizarre, and the guitar player was singing Prince's part. It just didn't sound right, you know. So for this Sheila E encore to be lights up, and it's the new revolution with the parade staging, and they are playing the song, that was chef's kiss. And yeah, it's just it hasn't been the same since. So
So
12:30, Kim, we ended on time, Kim Glenn.
What?
On time.
oh my God. Okay. Oh, I just gotta say, Erotic City, second song off of the show, just so you know, Arthur.
It what? They did do it, right? Yeah,
That
okay.
song. So thank you so much. It's always a blast. We can always go on for longer. I'm trying to be really quick because we are over time, and it's really hard to convey how much this means to me that we continue to gather. I never take this for granted, and I just want you all to know how much I love you. Okay, and if I never say it, trust me, I'm always feeling it. So I know sometimes I can be very short because I'm running around like a chicken. So I just know that it's not because I don't. I really, really appreciate every time you show up. And thank you, Arthur, for taking on the mantle of moderator. I really appreciate you for that.
Thank you for the honor.
Much for that. All right, so we're gonna take a 30-minute break. So move your bodies, eat, get your snacks, hydrate, and we are gonna come back for an amazing presentation panel. If you can't hang out for a lot, I would hope you'll come back because you don't want to miss this one. It is going to be moderated by the one and only. There will never be another. C. Lee McGinnis, and then we're gonna have my triplet starting off with Camila Cummings, and then we're going to have Zach Hoskins, Chris Johnson, and Zaire Lee is doing double duty this time. So
Yeah.
some
I'm
love.
so scared. You got all those people in front of me, like
Let's discuss the fears, I hear. Let's discuss the fear.
Oh my God. Okay, I need to get some.
All right, sure.
Later.
Later. I'm going backstage. See ya.